You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by Nax. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
So recently, the Association of Convenience Stores out of the UK has an annual crime report and other data. And one of the things they showed in their latest survey is that roughly 9 out of 10 people working in local shops have experienced verbal abuse over the last year. That's an astonishing number, but it's not unique to the UK. It's something we've seen in all of retail. We're going to talk about how do you address those numbers? And we have 2 guests from the Association of Convenience Stores. We have James Lowman, who's chief executive there, and Ed Woodall, who's government relations director and executes some of the program related to ShopKind Week. So welcome, gentlemen.
Hi, Jeff. Great to see you.
So want to start out, ShopKind Week is something that takes place in the first week of May, and we'll dive into the details of that. But I want to start with you, James. We talked about the crime survey that your organization puts together. 9 out of 10 workers have seen some kind of verbal abuse. Can you talk about why it's important to put together this survey, and then what were the next steps that brought forward a solution?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. We've been running a crime survey for a number of years now. And I think it's really got more traction in recent years because, along with other industry surveys, they all tell the same story, which is that there's a significant growth in shop theft, in abuse of colleagues, in violence in store. I mean, it tells a pretty grim picture, I'm afraid. There's nothing really positive to take from it in many ways. We're seeing the sort of brazenness of shop theft going up, and I see it from America as well. I see it on social media, TikToks and whatever, of people clearing shelves, and we get that over here as well to some extent. And so there's a lot of frustration about retail crime, a lot of frustration about police not investigating and pursuing thieves as much as they should. And obviously that can escalate to violence, because I think it's not unique to the UK, but a very clear picture about what causes shop theft here is about people with addiction problems who are repeat offenders. And in a village or small town neighborhood store, you can have 4 or 5 people causing 90% of the problems. It's those handful of people. And so real prolific repeat offenders. But one of the things that we saw all around that, it's all part of the same picture, is this uptick in retailers saying, and colleagues saying, we're just receiving just bad behavior on a day-to-day basis. People being abusive, people being disrespectful, people not showing any patience. And I think parts of that relates to the COVID experience. And I think our members say that during and after the COVID experience, they kind of saw the best of people and the worst of people. Most people were incredibly supportive of their local shop, recognized the very important role that it played. It was really positive towards the people working there, saw them as like an emergency service, which we kind of were at the time. But I think that also during that time and since that time, you see people with less patience, feeling that maybe that without the standards of behavior, without respect for people that obviously we all want to see. And so ShopKind really came out of that and said, look, how can we promote just better standards of behavior, more respect for people working in stores, and just to remind people, not necessarily the people are coming in with a hammer or a knife. Unfortunately, we can't reach them with a poster in a shop. Yeah, unfortunately, they've got other motivations. But people who maybe are at that point where they are losing patience, where they're not recognizing that's a human being behind the counter and they're working with that and they're dealing with that group of people needs to be reminded to ShopKind, which is where the phrase came from. So working right across the industry, it's one of the things I'm most proud of that we've done as ACS, because it's not just about convenience. It's about stores on Oxford Street, major city centres. It's about all sorts of, large stores, small stores, food shops, non-food, every part of the retail industry really united around this ShopKind message. So, we'll talk more about what's actually involved, but essentially some common materials in stores, a lot of very high profile people, politicians, retailers themselves, celebrities backing this campaign. And I think it's just been a really great thing for the last few years to push home that message in lots of different ways.
So Ed, we'll get to the details now. ShopKind, second year, and roughly dozens or more than 100 different groups participating, retailers, suppliers. But it's really the role that the government plays. Is that my understanding? It's a changeover into some new positions that give the timing of this that make the most sense. It's done in early May deliberately, right?
Sure. So the ShopKind campaign brings together all those different stakeholders that you've mentioned. So the government, they gave some funding initially to get ShopKind off the ground, but actually it's about the industry, about retailers across the whole sector choosing to engage in the ShopKind campaign. And we've tried to make it as simple and straightforward for them to do. They have a lot of options of how they can get different materials, put them in their stores or put them on social media to enable conversations, I think, with their customers and with their colleagues on what historically has probably been a difficult topic to talk to those audiences about. So, obviously you want to engage your colleagues in saying, well, these are the safety elements that we put in place to keep you safe when we're having these challenges. And ShopKind's help to do that in a positive way. And equally with customers, I think there's always a reservation around saying there are problems around stores, but ShopKind helps sort of present that to the customer in a positive way. Here is how we as a business are investing in the safety of our customers and our communities. Now, to do that, we have partnerships with government, but actually it's about the businesses taking this on themselves and making the ShopKind message their own. And I think one of the successes of the campaign is that people have been able to pick it up and use it in different ways. So if I reflect on ShopKind Week, then what I've seen has been so impressive is activation in stores. Materials that might be on a shelf edge, they might be on a digital display screen, but also colleagues having conversations in meetings, colleagues choosing to engage with their local police force. So it's really how those businesses want to pick it up and use it themselves. And I think that's been one of the great successes of the campaign.
So the campaign, the week ended just a couple weeks ago. Are there any examples, Ed, that just really stand out that a member has just done something extraordinary? It has made a difference, and you can see it already, whether it's this year or from last year.
Sure, we have some very big businesses made the commitment to put the materials at the very forefront of every shop entrance across the country, which is a commitment in itself. But also behind that, they use it in terms of engaging and talking with their colleagues. But I think the most impressive examples we've seen is how it's helped people build local relationships. So retailers and their business improvement districts that manage town centres coming together to think, how are we going to respond to this problem locally and engaging with the police? And that's where you probably get the best results from some of the trends that James was describing earlier around challenges in local communities that we're seeing where we might get abuse towards colleagues. So really local areas. So where we have colleague activation, I think that's where we've seen the most impact across the board.
And all the things that James had mentioned, similar to convenience stores across the world. That when you do have problems, it's part of the problem is convenience stores are convenient. They're not out of the way. So those incidents, it's just we're around. On one level, when you think about this, it's like, well, should we really be telling people to be people? And the answer is yes. But also it's doing it from the right focus. And I love this quote that I saw from James, where if you're going to tell people to be people, you also have to model that behavior. So there's a certain amount of empathy involved. And I just love this quote. It's clear that the cost of living crisis is putting additional pressure on people when they're out shopping, but this is too often translated into abuse of shop workers. So what you're saying is we understand there's a lot of frustration in life, but let's not take it out on each other. Let's find bigger solutions. And James, I guess that's really at its heart what ShopKind Week does. And how do we make that ShopKind year without decreeing it such?
Yeah, people are complex and they're contradictions, aren't they? And people can kind of excuse anything, if they can find a way to do that. And I think what it's trying to do is remind people that when they're out shopping, the people they're dealing with are human beings, just as their own family, and their people they deal with and their friends are human beings. And so you don't have a different set of rules for dealing with people because they work in a shop than you would if you if they came around for dinner, I mean, these are human beings, and you should treat them in fundamentally the same way. And I think one of the reasons why that message, which you say to some extent almost feels a bit, why does anyone need to say that? But I think sometimes you do need to say it. One of the reasons it's got so much traction is that I think the superpower of our industry is that people running retail businesses, people working in retail businesses, they realize pretty quickly that if you don't treat colleagues and customers, whoever they are, regardless of any characteristic, with the same respect, then you haven't really got a career in retail. I mean, that's the fundamental sort of entry level. And if you don't do that, you're not part of the retail industry. And I think that sort of message, I think that people working in retail are sick of not being always treated like that. In a minority of cases, I don't suggest that, that there are lots of fantastic customers who treat people brilliantly, but people working in retail are sick of not being treated in the same way. And they feel it's about time they put this message across. So I think we've really helped as a whole campaign with all the people involved in it, have helped those colleagues really feel a bit more empowered to say, well, that's not fine. And actually what is fine is to shop kind. And I think that's been, we shouldn't have to say it, but I think sometimes we do.
And the important part is, how do you show people working in the industry that they are valuable and that you are standing there with them in developing the program? But, on the aspirational side, maybe it's possible that by people being nicer, one by one, we can make a better society, because convenience stores around the world, they conduct a significant number of transactions every day. You could approximate it at a third to a half, depending on what country you're in. Just a massive amount of opportunity that, hey, if we can make a couple people go from being in a negative mood with negative behaviors possible to being in a positive mood with positive behaviors possible, that's been a pretty good day for retail.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you shop as much as you do anything, or as frequently as you do anything, really. So, it is a daily transaction, whether it's convenience stores. I mean, it's not far off daily for most people around convenience stores, but take the whole of retail. And maybe, yes, there is this sense that if you just hold the mirror up to people a little bit and say, it's important to shop kind, and people reflect on that a little bit, maybe they treat the bus driver more kindly, or the person on the train, or whatever it is, the person in the pub, or wherever it might be. There's other interactions as well. So I think that's right. Now, unfortunately, we can't solve all society's problems. These are very deep-rooted problems. They are to some extent global. I mean, they may present slightly differently in different countries, different cultures, but when I speak to colleagues in Europe and your colleagues at NACS and elsewhere in North America and elsewhere, Australia, the sort of problems we're seeing are not unique to the UK. These are global problems. We can't, through one campaign change that, but, we can still try to make some sort of dent on that. And if it means that people working in shops are having a more pleasant environment, then that's got to be a benefit.
Yes. And Ed, you were the one that is closest to the ground in terms of executing this. What's the whole process? We have the event in early May, but are you talking to members and getting them on board months and months in advance and saying, here's what you need to do, here's step 1, step 2, step 3, we'll make it easy for you? What is all that process to bring together this massive group of retailers?
It is a big job, and we try and have the conversation all year round and remind people about the campaign. As much as there's ShopKind Week, I see that as an accelerator for that message being out there all year round, because it can't just be for 1 week. It's got to be there every day for people to see. So we tend to have regular check-ins with members around using the campaign materials, around our plans to promote it nationally, because obviously we want to talk about it in the national media and to the government around the importance and focus on safety in communities on these issues. But the nuts and bolts of it we try and keep really, really simple, which is that all the materials are available on one open platform for everyone to access. They can put them in their store and choose whatever they want to do, and they can change the messaging to suit their business, because actually a lot of retailers, as you know, are already investing a huge amount in keeping their colleagues and communities safe. And they have their own internal campaigns and materials they want to use. And ShopKind isn't there to compete. It's there to complement what they're already doing and accelerate and elevate and promote what they are are doing. So as much as possible, we try and make the materials and the assets like posters, digital display screens, social media assets easy for people to use to put their own branding and materials on. And ShopKind the ShopKind week is a great opportunity for people to test that, use it in their business, but use it as a platform for the whole of the rest of the year to have that conversation. So regular check-ins and also making sure that those materials are really easy for people to use and engaging with the public, right? Because ultimately, this is a consumer-facing campaign, so it's got to be a good, positive message and really clear about what we're asking people to do.
I'm glad you mentioned that it continues throughout the year, because to a certain extent, you think about this period of the year as about the busiest time of the year. It starts ramping up here in the United States. You have Memorial Day in another week at the end of May, and that's where things ramp up from there till the end of August. A lot of sales in the summer. It's nicer weather, more sunshine. So I assume that this has an ancillary benefit, James, that it does carry forward through the busiest time of the year when people are more out and about. And there is that halo that hangs out and says, hey, let's continue to be nice to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we have 2 bank holidays in May and where we get good weather, which isn't necessarily the case this year, but that's certainly for the convenience sector. That should be the sort of driver through from Easter and then those bank holidays into the rest of the year. And hopefully that'll be the case this year. So yeah, it is a busier time. People are out about more. And again, going back to thinking about how we started thinking about ShopKind, there was an even more sort of stark ramping up in terms of the lockdowns and people thinking about coming out of lockdowns. And obviously a lot of the retail industry, not how we were allowed to open throughout, but a lot of the retail industry was forced to shut. So one of the challenges they were having were the grocery stores who were open during that winter of early 2021, during that period of time, the grocery stores were saying, in contrast to the spring of 2020, when people generally behaved very well towards the grocery retailers and they understood and it was something that people sort of adapted to quite quickly. By early 2021, with various lockdowns at various times, grocery retailers and their colleagues are getting really sick of the treatment they're getting from customers because all their frustrations really throughout the week, but also their frustrations with lack of availability, queuing, wearing masks, all the stuff that no one wanted to do. A lot of that landed on and people working in stores. So as we came out of that, you then had the people in the other stores. I remember lots of calls with governments and retailers, and they're saying, well, when people start getting out and about, how's that going to translate into the non-essential stores as they were termed as they reopened? So that was that ramping up was also part of that process. And I think ShopKind really helped to kind of smooth out that transition into those stores being open again.
You could probably take what you just said and apply it to 200 countries easily.
100%. Yeah, for sure.
All have the same dynamics that there was a moment where people were looking out for each other and then it just became not that. And then it became polarized. You say this, I say this, all around the world. So the idea of bringing them all back together in a positive way, because shop is a positive word, kind is a positive word. Those are two things that go nicely together. And you have depending upon the logo you're looking at, there's a smile associated with that. So all positive things, not saying something like, don't be a bad person. It is, we all know we're kind. So let's just bring that out a little bit more. Is there anything that, and I'll start with Ed on this one, that you would suggest to folks in other countries that they could either take this program, its guts, or the concept of this program and have it spread within their own country? What are things that you would recommend to anybody in how to further something like this? Because obviously it has real positive elements that translate across borders.
Sure. Well, I think the ShopKind message is applicable and can be taken across into to other countries as well because of that positivity that you just described. I think what sits behind the messaging as well is some partnership work with businesses to make sure there's buy-in from those businesses to take it forward themselves. It has to be individual business ones to take it forward, and also making sure that the materials suit those businesses out there and they can be really adjustable. But at its core, ShopKind, as you say, is really simple. It's very positive and is a good way to engage with customers. And I already see other countries contacting us, Australia, Ireland, others looking at, can we replicate the ShopKind messaging? And we really welcome that. I think let's take it out there further.
Well, add the US to the list because I just asked.
There we go.
Do you have any early metrics, Ed, in terms of just broad reach, like number of stores that participated or number of customers that might have been impacted by this, to give people a sense of the breadth of this?
At this stage for this ShopKind week, we don't have the data, but there's certainly something that we're looking to get in terms of consumer awareness around the campaign. We do know it's been across thousands of sites across the UK in terms of the physical assets, and then across social media channels from many, many business leaders and, as James said, as senior politicians as well. So the campaign's got some real reach. I still think we have more to go and more to do to get that impact there. But certainly there's something we want to measure more in the future and actually measure the level of colleagues that have engaged with the process as well, because I think that is the real success of the campaign too. So not yet, but I would urge your listeners to, just tap in, hashtag ShopKind, all one word, and just see the level of business and the range of businesses that are engaging in the campaign.
So James, when you talk to members, what kind of feedback do you get after 2 years of this? Are they already looking forward to May next year or something in between now and May to continue the momentum on this?
I think there's two sides. It's all very positive about ShopKind. There is a lot of positivity about ShopKind. There's a recognition that day-to-day of what they and their colleagues are facing is unacceptable too often, and that ShopKind really addresses that head on. And I think there's a real appreciation. What they wouldn't want is a sort of convenience kind, and then a pharmacy kind, and then a, whatever you call it, general merchandise kind. No one would call it that, would they? But, it's great that it's a really, truly pan-retail thing. And I think that's something that people find much better to engage in. It's recognized by more consumers. And also it doesn't suggest that there's a particular problem with convenience or a particular problem with another type of retail. So that's really good. I think it's also true to say, and I don't want to sort of duck this one, that there are other massive issues still relating to crime in our member stores, and ShopKind does not remove those problems. Unfortunately, lovely it did. But I think there's a recognition that it's almost become one of those things we won't want to be without anymore. But it in itself is not the solution, but it certainly helps in terms of trying to sort of set that expectation. All the things you said, Jeff, about that expectation about behavior and about how we act in and around retail. So I get lots of positive feedback on ShopKind, more retailers, more of our members engaging year on year, seeing the relevance, seeing other places wanting to engage. But also we get, I wouldn't say pushback, but we also get the other side of that, which is retailers saying, that's great, but thefts going up, violent incidents are going up. How do we tackle that? So it's part of the wider picture as well.
Agree with everything you just said there. It is a tool in a bigger toolkit that we need a lot of work to do to get back to where we want to be as a retail environment, not just in our industry, but all industries. And if we do this together, then nobody feels like they're sticking their neck out. And it's like, oh, well, customers are going to say, what's wrong with that group? Why do they need this special attention? So bringing together that bigger coalition, I think, makes it that much more powerful. So we talked about ACS. How can they find out more about the information you provide? You have great research and great infographics as part of that research. Where can they learn more about ACS and some of the information that you also have with ShopKind?
So acs.org.uk is the website. Our socials, ACS_local shops on X or whatever it's called these days. So, I've always get those things. There's Ed's hashtag ShopKind. You'll see loads of stuff there if you go on socials and go to hashtag ShopKind. Anything I've missed then? Those are things up. That's where we get.
No, that's exactly it. Yeah. And you can see all the materials for the ShopKind campaign there and how you can use them when they're free and easy accessible. So you can see how you could use them yourselves.
I want to thank you both for joining us today. It was a great conversation about how we can be more aspirational and make a difference and not just change our businesses, but maybe change our communities as well. So thanks again for joining us today. And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.